It was a gorgeous sunny day in the heart of Shanghai. Inside a cozy apartment, a young mother sat quietly by the window, gently nursing her baby. She hummed softly, whispering sweet words about how, yes, raising a baby could be tough sometimes, but all she ever wanted was for her little sugar pea to grow up happy and healthy. Now, here's the twist. That baby she was doting on, that was me. And I wasn't just any ordinary newborn. I'd been reincarnated. My tiny brain wasn't even fully cooked yet, and my brand new name was Lin Zinchen. Oh, and to make things even more interesting, I had a cheat ability. By the time I was only 3 months old, my parents, Yan Sheng and Wan Xin, were already joking that I must be some kind of baby genius. They'd laugh and say my legs moved so fast it looked like I was training for the Olympics. Little did they know, I had just completed my first system quest. My special talent was simple but powerful. If I moved any part of my body over and over again, it would actually grow stronger. The ability was called Use and Advance. My dad liked to compare me to cyborgs or gene fusers, though honestly, I had no idea what those were supposed to be. By 4 months old, I could already sit up and crawl, but I didn't want to freak my parents out with my unnatural progress, so I trained secretly at night while they were fast asleep. I was walking by the time I turned 5 months old, but I kept that under wraps until I hit 6 months. That was when I finally decided to let my parents see me sit up and crawl for real. I had to give them at least a small shock. One evening, while we were watching the news together, the anchor started talking about something called aberrant beasts and how gene fusers and cyborgs were teaming up to fight them. That was the moment I realized this wasn't the same Earth I remembered from my past life. The planet had gone through some wild mutations, and now terrifying creatures known as aberrant beasts roamed the world. To survive, humanity had split into 2 camps. One was the path of mechanical ascension, where people replaced their bodies with robotic parts to battle the beasts. The other was the path of genetic fusion, where humans merged their DNA with that of the monsters, fighting power with power. Lucky for me, I had my own system. My best move was to train quietly, keep my head low, and survive in this crazy new world. One afternoon, a cheerful knock at the door snapped me out of my thoughts. A warm-looking woman introduced herself as Xu Meng, our new neighbor, and handed my mom a housewarming gift. Standing beside her stood her husband, Wan Ye Shen, holding their adorable daughter, Qinghan Shen. That baby girl became my very first friend in this new life, though at the time, I had no idea how deeply our fates would eventually intertwine. When I hit 7 months old, I started running laps all around the house, jumping and stretching every muscle I could. Thanks to Use and Advance, I was getting stronger with every movement. Even learning to speak, it all came easier. By 8 months, I was sneaking in push-ups and sit-ups whenever my parents weren't looking. Of course, that couldn't last forever. One day, my mom caught me mid-sit-up. She froze, rubbed her eyes, and blinked in disbelief. By the time she looked again, I had already flopped back down and pretended to be fast asleep. As a writer herself, she convinced herself she must have imagined it. A few days later, when my mom wanted to bathe me, she was surprised to see I already had abs like a bodybuilder as an 8-month-old baby. She called for my dad to come and watch. As both of them were clueless about the system and my training routine, my dad just tried to calm my mom by saying, maybe their child was a 1 in a million genius with a bright future of becoming a powerful gene fuser or at least a cyborg, which didn't sit well with my mom, but was enough to let go of me for the time being. Having parents who both wrote web novels turned out to be a blessing in disguise. But I wasn't the only prodigy on this mutated Earth. Word spread about a kid from an ancient martial arts family who could lift a 20-kilogram dumbbell with one hand at age 2. That got me curious. When I turned 2, I gave it a shot, and not only could I do it, but I probably could have thrown in a few push-ups while I was at it. Just as I was about to test myself further, Mom walked in and told me that Hanan had come over to play. I dropped the dumbbell, opened the door, and there she was, sweet little Qinghan, holding out a tart for me with both hands. We played together, though with our difference in mental age, it was mostly her eating and napping while I kept her entertained. There was one downside to having a baby clinging to your back, though. By the time I was 3, I could lift 40 kilograms with one hand, already surpassing that so-called martial arts prodigy. Still, I was only at ordinary tier 1 on the biological scale. I started to wonder whether a human could ever reach tier 2. With those thoughts in mind, I begged my parents to let me go outside for the first time. The city was full of people with robotic limbs or beast-like features, cyborgs and gene fusers walking side by side. The first place I wanted to explore was the library, since my parents wouldn't let me near any electronic devices. The library became my sanctuary. While other kids were playing, I sneaked into the adult section and picked up a thick book that explained the truth of this new world. According to ancient stone tablets discovered in mysterious ruins, life was divided into 6 biological levels: ordinary, advanced, rare, epic, legendary, and mythical. Each level had 9 tiers. It was enough for me to understand. Compared to those higher-level beings, we were basically ants, so if I wanted to have any shot at surviving, I needed to step up my training to its maximum, at least until I became ready to face them. I studied hard and trained even harder. By age 4, I was in kindergarten and had already broken through to ordinary Tier 2. I could lift 80 kilograms with one hand, jump over a meter high, and sprint 100 meters in under 11 seconds. And as the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. So when I saw some kids bullying poor Hanan one afternoon, I stepped in. I landed right in front of them and warned that if they messed with her again, I'd pee on their beds every night. That was enough to turn the bullies into the ones crying. Hanan looked at me like I was some kind of superhero. And right then, my system rewarded me with a new quest. Being the kindergarten king came with perks, and I wasn't about to waste them. Half a year later, I completed my reading quest and gained the celestial root of wisdom, an attribute that pushed my learning ability to the human limit. Time flew by, and before I knew it, graduation day arrived. We were 7 years old, ready to start elementary school. During summer break, I kept training hard just like before and even smashed my high jump record, improving it by 2 meters, and broke my precious 8-second barrier in the 100-meter dash, now feeling like I'm the new roadrunner. With my new wisdom boost, I breezed through most of the elementary school curriculum on my own. My next goal was simple: unlock the elementary school top dog title. When the school year began at Shanghai's City Sunshine Elementary, I was already ahead of the curve. I'd even started teaching myself middle and high school material. Competitions felt like child's play, but I still entered just to see my mom cry happy tears. In my spare time, I tutored Ching Han. Her grades shot up, and after just one semester, she ranked second in the class right behind me. Determined to stand out even more, I joined every event at the school sports meet and shattered records across the board. Just when I thought I could settle into a nice and peaceful elementary school life, a special transfer student named Bai Shui showed up in our class and changed everything. The reason she seemed so special, even at first glance, was the faint, not quite human aura I sensed coming from her. The new girl walked into the classroom, and right away, every head turned. She had this quiet kind of beauty that caught people off guard. Even Han couldn't help thinking her hair looked amazing, soft and shiny like something out of a commercial. She took the seat right behind me, and for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about her. It wasn't just her looks. She gave off an aura that didn't quite feel human. After a few days, it became clear that Bai Sui wasn't like the other students. She barely spoke to anyone. When the bell rang, instead of chatting or heading out with the rest of us, she would just rest her head on her desk and stay there, perfectly still. She hardly even got up to go to the restroom. At first, the whole class buzzed with curiosity. People whispered, took sneaky selfies, and spread rumors. But after a while, everything changed. Shui began secreting a strange white liquid from her body, and whatever it was, the smell was unbearable. The stinky liquid was all it took to shatter her image. In an instant, her beauty was forgotten, replaced by the very odor she hated most about herself. But she could do nothing except clench her fists, grit her teeth, and endure the endless humiliation day after day. However, that did not last long either, as Ching Han desperately asked me to do something about it. I stood up and walked straight to the bully. The look on his face was priceless. He froze like he'd seen a ghost. I told him to clean up the mess he'd made. Without arguing, he grabbed a cloth and wiped down every drop of water on her desk. Then I looked around and told everyone who had bullied Shui to come forward and apologize. The room went silent, and one by one, the kids shuffled over and muttered their apologies, bowing like guilty little sheep. Sui lifted her eyes to me and gave a small, grateful smile. Han and I both felt a spark of pride knowing we'd stood up for her. From that day on, Han made it his mission to include Shui whenever he could, and he always dragged me along with him. Slowly, she began to open up. Whenever she brought snacks, she'd always share them with us first. But even then, she still carried a deep insecurity. One afternoon, she asked softly if we were disgusted by her because of the smell. She explained that ever since she was little, people avoided her, keeping their distance as if she were contagious. Having real friends felt like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. Han smiled and told her not to worry, that it wasn't a dream, and that as long as she wanted it, she would always have us as her friends. His words made Sui's eyes well up with tears, and before we knew it, she threw her arms around him and sobbed her heart out. When she finally calmed down, she remembered something and rummaged through her bag. With a bright smile, she pulled out a necklace made from 2 sharp beast fangs. She said her mom had given it to her on her birthday last year, and now she wanted Han to have it as a gift. Holding it up proudly, she declared that we'd be friends forever and ever. For a while, it really felt like that promise might hold, but life had other plans. One day, Han came running to me, completely out of breath, saying that Shui was being transferred out. I refused to believe it until I saw the withdrawal papers myself. That afternoon, I snuck near the principal's office and overheard her talking with her father. The tone in their voices, the words they used, it all told me that Bai Shui's background was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. And then, just like that, she was gone. Maybe she really was just a passing chapter in my childhood. That night, I was giving my mom a shoulder massage, using the professional techniques I'd learned thanks to the celestial root of wisdom. The news was playing in the background. The anchor was talking excitedly about a new prodigy who had successfully fused with aberrant beast genes and reportedly lifted 1,000-jin boulder with one hand. I was stunned, but Dad just chuckled and said they were probably turning the guy into a celebrity to sell products. That naturally sparked a mini argument between him and Mom, just another normal evening in our house. Meanwhile, I couldn't help doing the math in my head. The gene fusion had boosted that guy's strength fivefold, but even without it, I could already lift nearly that much, and I was still younger than him. That thought made me feel unexpectedly hopeful about my own potential. But that moment of pride didn't last. Breaking news flashed across the screen, and my stomach dropped. A massive aberrant beast attack had just occurred in a neighboring country. From the eyewitness footage, it looked like a swarm of enormous, mutant rats was devouring everything in sight. To show how bad things are, the camera zoomed in on a hot blonde woman with huge, tempting melons who was captured alive. She couldn't help but wish for a prince with a white horse to come to her rescue. However, since no prince was living in the area, everything came to a swift and painful end. The news anchor kept talking, explaining that investigators had discovered the recent aberrant rat attack had actually been orchestrated by heretics working in the shadows. That revelation sparked calls for other nations to join forces with Sakura country to root out those heretics together. Apparently, this cult was an anti-human organization started by traitors, and for reasons that made no sense except their own twisted logic, they had become lapdogs for the aberrant beasts and were unleashing attacks on the world. Honestly, the only silver lining in all of that was that I had been born in a powerful country where life felt relatively stable, so I could stick to my plan of keeping my head down and getting stronger. Then, a terrifying roar split the air outside my window, like a series of sonic booms all at once. I sprinted over, yanked the curtains open, and watched fighter jets streak across the sky as they raced towards some unknown destination. The next morning, Han came to walk me to school, and for a second, I noticed her beast fang necklace glowing faintly. That made me wonder if the fang really was from an aberrant beast, which would explain the strange, not quite human vibe I kept sensing from Han. The glow flickered, and then vanished in an instant, so we both shrugged it off. Still, with cyborgs swarming the city the night before and that weird necklace flash, I had a bad feeling, like the world was lining up another disaster. On our walk to school, a striking red-haired woman stopped us. She told us we looked adorable and asked if we were siblings. Han grinned and said no, we were not brother and sister, we were just best friends. The woman smiled and admitted she was jealous that she had never had a childhood friend like that, but then she pushed a little too far and asked, in a tone that felt overly nosy, why we were walking to school without our parents. Before Han could answer, I took her hand and pulled us away, warning her never to talk to strangers and telling her, when we reached school, not to answer weird questions from random adults. After class, we cut through a creepy, deserted alley that made Han nervous, but I told her not to worry since the whole block was scheduled for demolition next week and everyone had already moved out. It turned out we were not alone. The same red-haired woman from the morning popped up again, this time talking into her phone about tracking down the kids. I could not believe she had actually followed us. She tried to lure us with promises of treats at her place, but before she could finish, her hulking companion lost patience and charged. He announced he would knock us out and drag us away. He barreled toward me, but I was ready. I wound up and punched him hard in the chest, driving him into a wall and sending him coughing up blood. The red-haired woman came next. I did not hesitate and hit her in the face with a brick. I knew I had to finish them off to keep my secret safe. Then the ground began to tremble. It was not an ordinary quake. A monstrous claw exploded up from beneath the pavement, and before we could even scream, a giant aberrant rat loomed over us in the alley. It snapped its jaws, bit the woman in two, and scooped up her partner as if they were nothing. I grabbed Han, who was frozen in shock, and we ran as if our lives depended on it because, in truth, they did. While we were running for our lives, a cyborg woman swooped down from above and went straight for the giant rat. She raised her hand, announced her anesthetic smoke skill, and dropped a cluster of bombs right on the monster's head. The explosion was massive, and Han and I watched the whole thing from just around the corner, barely breathing. The beast looked stunned, and before it could recover, she charged in and sliced it apart with a powerful strike. Later that night, when I saw the footage on the news, I realized she wasn't even one of the top-tier fighters. The reason it had taken her so long to finish the monster was simple. Giant aberrant rats were terrifying creatures that could reach ordinary tier 5. Thinking about that made me grateful I had escaped when I did. It also made something else clear to me. I had to train much harder than before if I wanted to survive. Even though the threat of aberrant rats hung over everyone, life went on. Han Han and I celebrated our 9th birthday together, made wishes, and exchanged gifts. With the help of my celestial root of wisdom, I had learned how to carve wood, so I made her a small hairpin. She thanked me with such joy that it felt like I had given her something worth a fortune. Time moved quickly, and before we knew it, elementary school was behind us. We were heading into middle school, and I was actually a bit excited about it. During the school break, I trained constantly. Just before the first day of classes, I finally broke through to ordinary Tier 3. My physical stats had become almost unbelievable. I could lift 700 kilograms with one hand, jump 4 meters high, and run 100 meters in 6 seconds. A few days later, I watched a news segment about a famous prodigy from Kyoto. He had fused his genes with those of a giant ant and could lift a 2-ton alloy bar with one hand. I couldn't help calculating the difference, and it turned out that I was already stronger without using any gene fusion at all. The thought of how powerful I might become in the future filled me with excitement and determination. When middle school started, principals from all over the city tried to recruit me. I had been the top student in Shanghai during elementary school, so I was a bit of a local celebrity. In the end, I decided to attend Shanghai Middle School, but only on one condition. Han had to be in my class too. On registration day, both the principal and my homeroom teacher welcomed me personally. They told me they were counting on me to bring honor to the school. After a short and polite conversation, I excused myself and hurried out. Han and I had already made plans to play badminton before classes began, and the school's sports facilities looked too good to ignore. Hanan was about to serve when a tall, older student suddenly stepped in, caught the shuttlecock in midair, and told us that the court was reserved for upperclassmen. A few of his friends joined him and started teasing Han, saying she was too cute to be there. She didn't back down and told them that we had arrived first. That was my moment to step in. I pulled another shuttlecock from my pocket, tossed it into the air, and jumped so high that it probably looked unreal. When I hit it, the force was so strong that it tore straight through their racket and even ripped a hole in the mascot hat one of them was wearing. The older boys froze for a second, then quickly apologized and ran away. After that, word spread all over the school, and nobody dared to bother us. So, things went as smoothly as possible. Since I had already finished the entire curriculum, I just read every other book I found interesting during class. At night, thanks to my celestial wisdom, I started learning all kinds of new skills online. To speed up my acquisition of the middle school overlord title, I entered a bunch of national competitions in every possible subject and, of course, got first or second place in 99% of them. A semester flew by, and even though the title hadn't unlocked yet, I ended up with a crowd of fangirls. Despite knowing I would regret this decision when I turned 30 years old, I ignored them all and focused instead on tutoring Han and gearing up for the school sports festival. When the time came, I signed up for the 3 big events: shot put, high jump, and sprinting, since those were the main categories for strength, speed, and jumping skills. My plan was simple, to dominate all 3 and prove who really ran this place, but I still held back just enough not to scare people and just take first place in everything. As soon as the last event ended, I felt a rush of power, which meant the middle school overlord title was finally mine. There was something fascinating I had recently learned. For predators, life essence was everything. It was said that by consuming the life essence of other creatures, you could strengthen your own body and evolve faster. That idea stuck in my head, and I began wondering what life essence really was. Out of curiosity, I turned to Han Han and asked if I could borrow her beast fang for a moment. She handed it to me without hesitation. The instant I touched it, I felt a faint trace of energy flow into me. It was the life essence of something called the abyssal giant butterfly. That was when it hit me. The fang was actually one of the butterfly's teeth. When I got home, I decided to dig deeper. Now that I knew the beast's name, I figured I might find something online. After hours of searching, I came up empty. There was nothing at all about this butterfly anywhere. That left only one option. I would have to experiment. I took the fang from my bag, squeezed it in my fist for a few moments, and focused to see how much of its life essence I could absorb into my body. The system reported that I had absorbed about 2% of the butterfly's ability. Even if I used both fangs, that was all I could get for now. I made a mental note to find another one someday, so I could unlock the full potential of its power. The next afternoon, after school, I was biking Hanan home so we could squeeze in some extra training when someone shouted my name. It was Coach Guo from the martial arts team. He had seen my performance at the school sports meet and was thrilled about recruiting me. His excitement was so intense that he nearly startled both of us. Before I could even respond, he hurried off, leaving me standing there completely speechless. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I spotted a cockroach scuttling across the floor. I clapped my hands together to crush it, secretly hoping that the predator law might activate. Nothing happened. Not ready to give up, I decided to run another test. I grabbed my phone, hopped on my bike, and took Han with me to the supermarket. My goal was to test whether beast meat could trigger the same reaction. When we arrived, I was amazed at the amount of beast meat available. The problem was that everything was sealed in plastic packaging. I needed direct contact to test my theory. Just as I was trying to figure out what to do, a butcher nearby started advertising his fresh-cut beast meat. That was exactly what I needed. I rushed over, picked up a piece at random, and the moment my hand touched it, a surge of life essence pulsed through me. Grinning from ear to ear, I raised the meat proudly. Han looked both curious and uneasy and asked if I felt anything different. I told her that it did not feel strange at all and suggested that she try touching it too. She shook her head quickly, clearly disgusted by the idea. Since we were already there, I decided to buy some anyway. I chose a small cut of ghost shadow squid meat to start with, even though I was already bracing myself for the price. When the cashier told us the total, Han nearly fainted. I gave her a reassuring smile and patted her head, telling her not to worry. My mom had given me money and asked me to bring back enough for both of our families because she was planning to prepare a beast meat feast that weekend. After paying, we left the store and laughed about how expensive everything had been, wondering when we would ever afford something like that again. By the time we finished shopping, it was already after 9 at night. With all the strange things happening lately, we decided to head straight home instead of wandering around. Even on the way home, I couldn't resist testing my theory on this expensive meat. So, like a selfish idiot, I slowly reached out and touched it. The moment I did, a purple surge of ghost shadow squid's life essence shot through my body, and I realized I'd absorbed about 0.1% of it. That night, as we rode our bikes home, I started doing the math in my head. To absorb the full essence of the ghost shadow squid, I would need around 100,000 yuan's worth of meat. The squid's special power was the ability to dissolve into water and disappear, which sounded like an incredible skill to have. If I could actually gain that ability, it would be worth every coin I spent. Besides, this was already the cheapest kind of beast meat I could find. It was obvious that I needed money, and fast. I decided to check the meat again to make sure it had not spoiled yet. Thankfully, it still looked fine. Just as I was putting it away, I got distracted and almost crashed my bike straight into someone. Han called out my name and pointed towards something ahead that froze my blood. Our teacher was being held hostage by a man who had a knife pressed against her throat. The entire area was surrounded by police. They were shouting at the man to calm down and to release the hostage. The sergeant ordered his officers not to shoot because the risk was too high. He said that even using sleeping gas might take too long to work. Without thinking, I picked up a small stone from the ground. With a quick flick of my fingers, I sent it flying so fast that it seemed to slice through the air. It hit the man's hand, knocking the knife out of his grip. The officers immediately rushed in, tackled him, and managed to bring the situation under control. My teacher was shaken but safe. Han turned to me with wide eyes, asking if I had been the one who threw the rock. I pressed a finger to my lips and tried to quietly slip away, but the sergeant called out for me to stop. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second I thought I was in trouble. When the officer asked if I was the one who threw the rock, I just said no, grabbed Han, and ran as fast as I could. But when I heard the officer talking about good people and a reward, I changed my mind faster than I had run. I immediately returned to him and admitted that I actually did remember something about throwing that rock. He told me to follow him so I could fill out a report and claim the reward. Just as they were loading the criminal into the police car, things took a terrifying turn. The man started convulsing violently, his body twisting and swelling until he transformed into a monstrous mutant right before our eyes. With a roar, he broke free from his restraints and lunged at a female officer. The sergeant shouted for his team to open fire, warning them to watch out for the civilians nearby. Bullets flew, but the mutant rat was far too fast and strong. I grabbed my teacher with one arm and Han with the other, running as fast as my legs could move. My only thought was to get everyone out of there alive. Thankfully, the creature did not chase us. Before I could catch my breath, a cyborg dropped from the sky and kicked the mutant with such force that it slid across the street. She powered up a laser cannon built into her arm and fired a beam of bright purple light. The blast hit the creature dead on, reducing it to ash in seconds. I stood there, completely stunned. Thanks to that cyborg girl, we survived, and we couldn't be more relieved. While Henian tried to calm our sweet kindergarten teacher, I was the one who ended up needing comfort the next moment. The expensive meat we bought earlier had been roasted and spoiled in the cyborg's attack. Frustrated, I tossed the rotten meat onto the ground. Han gave me an exasperated look and told me to calm down, reminding me that it was just a piece of meat and not the end of the world. After a short break, we went with the cops to give our statements to them, and weirdly enough, ended up in the same car as the mutant's smelly, burned corpse. That's when it hit me. There might still be a trace of life essence left inside the beast's remains. Honestly, there was only one way for me to figure out what was really happening. I took a deep breath and slowly reached out toward the burned body. The instant my fingers brushed against it, a wave of shock ran through me. I could actually feel it. 5% of the giant mutant rat's life essence flowed straight into me. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to act casual. I stretched my arms like I was just loosening up, pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. The last thing I needed was a nearby cop getting suspicious and asking questions I could not answer. Later, at the public security office, the captain started questioning me about the whole rock-throwing incident. He was calm but serious, clearly curious about how a middle schooler managed such a perfect shot. I gave him my most innocent face and said it was all because I practiced with my right hand a lot. He looked at me with this expression that said he had heard every excuse in the world and mine was not even close to convincing. Just as the silence started getting awkward, my mom burst into the room. Her face was pale with worry, and the second she saw me, she ran straight over and hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe. I tried to calm her down, telling her over and over that I was fine, but she was trembling and would not let go. She made me promise, really promise, that if anything dangerous ever happened again, I would find a safe place to hide instead of running toward the danger. She said she just wanted to see me grow up healthy and happy. I nodded and promised her again before we left the station together. I kept trying to reassure her, saying I would be careful from now on. As Han and I walked past a group of officers on our way out, I overheard them talking quietly about something that caught my attention. They were discussing the rat cults, saying that the groups had managed to infiltrate universities and even parts of the government. They mentioned a plan to wipe them out completely and kept referring to someone called the Rat King. That name immediately sparked my curiosity. I dove straight into researching it online. I wanted to know everything there was about this so-called Rat King. Apparently, he had become pretty well known recently, and his followers were rumored to be hiding right here in Shanghai. Their activity had surged this year, which definitely did not make me feel any safer. While I was sitting in the car thinking about everything I had read, an idea crossed my mind. What if the Rat King was trying to evolve into a higher life form? Maybe that was why his followers were collecting all those strange evolution materials. The thought made too much sense to ignore. It would not surprise me at all if the Rat King had already become sentient. Just as I was lost in thought, I caught sight of a massive rat outside. It was easily twice the size of a cat, and I could not help but wonder if it had anything to do with the Rat King. Then again, in this world, seeing rats that size was not exactly unusual anymore. That was when I noticed Han acting strange. She was really quiet, staring down at the floor, and I saw liquid dripping near her feet. Part of me figured it was just nerves, since she always got jumpy when she was scared. But another part of me could not help but wonder if her problem was actually some kind of hidden ability she had not discovered yet. Later that night, when we got home, my mom suddenly shouted from the kitchen in total disbelief. She had just discovered that all the beast meat was gone. My mind went blank for a moment, then I blurted out the first excuse I could think of. I told her there had been an emergency, and I must have dropped the meat somewhere on the way back. She sighed, gave me a tired look, then patted my shoulder and told me that my safety mattered more than anything else. I let out a small sigh of relief, feeling proud of myself for pulling that off. But my relief did not last long because my dad stood up, grabbed his coat, and said he was going to go out and look for the missing meat. I nearly panicked and begged him not to go, doing everything I could to convince him to stay home. That same night, in another part of the city, the captain who had questioned me earlier, thinking about everything that had happened. He could not shake the feeling that my rock-throwing accuracy was far too precise to be ordinary. But before he could think too deeply about it, a low scratching noise came from behind him. He turned, and to his horror, a giant rat was perched on a shelf, staring right at him with gleaming red eyes. The captain fired several shots, but the office erupted into chaos. Nobody could even tell whose blood was splattered across the walls. The next morning at school, I could barely concentrate. My thoughts kept racing through plans and possibilities for how to level up faster. For a moment, I even considered becoming one of those top student influencers who stream their study sessions and sell online tutoring materials. The idea sounded profitable, but deep down, I knew that flashy, attention-grabbing stuff just was not my style. Then an idea struck me like lightning. Martial arts tournaments, that was where the real money flowed in this world. Between cyborg fighters and gene fusion users, those competitions pulled in massive crowds and even bigger prize pools. I realized right then that this was my best shot to earn money and make real progress at the same time. Later that day, I found Coach Guo relaxing inside Gymnasium Building C with a bottle of some sugary drink in his hand. The moment I greeted him, he nearly choked, spraying his drink all over the floor. Once he caught his breath, he asked if I had finally decided to join the martial arts team. I stepped closer and lowered my voice, asking if I could actually compete in the city tournaments and whether the prize money was really as high as everyone claimed. He grinned, nodded, and said everything I had heard was true. That was all I needed to hear. I reached out my hand, shook his firmly, and told him I wanted to officially join the team. Coach Guo's face lit up. He clapped his hands together, called the rest of the team over, and proudly introduced me as their newest member. The other guys gathered around, greeting me one after another, and before long, I felt like part of the group. Since I had never gone through formal martial arts training before, Coach Guo decided to start me off with the basics. He demonstrated simple fist forms, kicking drills, and a few defensive stances, warning me that even the simplest moves would take at least a week to master properly. But when it was my turn to try, I closed my eyes for a second and visualized every technique clearly in my mind. My celestial root of wisdom gave me that perfect mental blueprint. When I started moving, my body flowed naturally through each sequence. Every punch and kick came out crisp, fast, and clean. The sounds echoed across the gym, and for a moment, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Coach Guo stared, frozen in place. I could practically see the thoughts racing behind his eyes as he watched me move. That night, while setting the table at home, my mom called out from the kitchen, asking me to grab the bowls. I walked in, curious, and asked what we were having for dinner. She turned around with a smile and said we were having shadow squid, the dish I had been craving for what felt like forever. The aroma filled the room, and I could not hold back anymore. The moment the plate hit the table, I grabbed my chopsticks and took the first bite. My mom watched me with amusement and asked how it tasted. I practically sang her praises between bites, telling her it was incredible. She laughed and said she had bought 3 whole gins this time because she knew I would love it. After finishing my plate, I checked my inner stats and saw something that made my heart skip. I had absorbed 3.01% of the creature's life essence. Eating it directly clearly worked far better than touching it. Later that evening, I was scrolling through the news when a headline caught my eye. A 14-year-old girl had just become the youngest cyborg in history. The broadcast showed her activating her internal energy system, lifting a 2,000-kilogram SUV with one hand, sprinting 100 meters in 3 seconds flat, and jumping 8 meters straight up. I leaned back, stunned. It made me wonder which one was stronger, gene fusion users or cyborgs. But then the tone of the news changed. The anchor began reporting on the tragedy at the public security office. The captain who had questioned me yesterday had been found dead, killed in what they believe was a mutant rat attack. The moment I heard that, a chill ran through me. I had a sinking feeling that it was connected to the giant rats from the night before. It was another grim reminder that I needed to train harder, faster, and smarter if I wanted to survive what was coming. Over the next few weeks, I pushed myself like never before. My 100-meter dash time dropped to 4.61 seconds, and my vertical leap reached 5.51 meters, high enough to jump onto a rooftop without effort. My strength had skyrocketed too, and I could now lift roughly 1,000 kilograms with one hand. I drilled through my martial arts forms every day until my body felt like a finely tuned weapon, all in preparation for the tournament I knew was coming. The next morning, I was back at the gym early, hammering through my drills. Hannon came along to watch, curious about why I had suddenly become so obsessed with training. While we were practicing, a senior girl approached with a friendly smile and asked if I had eaten breakfast yet. She even offered me a bottle of fresh milk, but I simply thanked her and continued walking. That small gesture apparently didn't sit well with someone else. A tall guy stepped out from the side of the gym, his expression dark. I recognized him immediately. He used to be the school's martial arts champion, and from the look on his face, it was obvious that my refusal had bruised his ego. Worse yet, the girl who had offered me the milk was his self-proclaimed goddess. He demanded to know why I would turn down such a nice gesture or at least pass the drink to someone more deserving, meaning him, of course. He pointed straight at me, his voice sharp with anger, and told me to step into the ring if I had the guts. I looked at him calmly, my pulse steady, and accepted the challenge. Right then, a new system notification popped up before my eyes. It was a quest: defeat 1,000 different opponents. A grin spread across my face. The timing could not have been better. I tightened my fists, feeling the strength coursing through my arms, and prepared to fight. Word spread faster than wildfire, and before long, the entire gym was buzzing about the upcoming match between me and a senior. A crowd began to form around the court, voices mixing with the sound of sneakers squeaking on the floor. Some fangirls shouted my name, their excitement filling the air, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone recording the whole thing on their phone. My opponent looked irritated, clearly not happy that most people were betting against him. I could tell from his expression that he wanted to end this fight quickly, probably hoping to take me down before I had the chance to surpass him completely. I looked at him calmly and told him to make it quick, since I wanted to be home in time for dinner. That earned me a smirk. He said he would gladly grant my wish, and when Coach Guo raised his hand and gave the signal, the match began. Before we could start trading blows, though, my opponent decided to play the nice guy. He pointed out that I had only been training for a month while he had 2 full years of experience and said I could have the first 3 moves. That was all the advantage I needed. I took 1 step forward, focused all my strength, and threw a punch straight at his chest. The impact echoed through the gym like thunder. He flew backward, tumbling across the floor until he finally hit the wall and slumped down, too dazed to stand. For a few seconds, nobody moved or said a word. Coach Guo's jaw nearly hit the ground. The entire team stared at me as if I had just broken the laws of physics. Han jumped up and cheered with both hands in the air, and the fangirls screamed my name so loudly that my ears rang. I could not help but grin, feeling the rush of victory surge through me, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. My system quest had just started, and I still had 999 opponents to defeat before unlocking the natural selection attribute. I turned to the rest of the team, still smiling, and asked who wanted to go next. Instantly, the room fell silent. One by one, my senior teammates started mumbling excuses about needing to stretch, warm up, or take a quick break, and within moments, they were all stepping away from the mat. The guy I had just beaten finally stood up, rubbing his shoulder and claiming I had only caught him off guard. Coach Guo crossed his arms and told him to stop making excuses and take the loss like a man. Then he called out for Lizzie to step forward. Lizzie hesitated for a second, then nodded and came to stand across from me. 10 minutes later, every single team member was sprawled out on the floor, groaning in defeat. Unfortunately, the system didn't count any of those matches toward my quest since they were all from the same team, so the counter still showed 999 opponents remaining. Coach Guo walked up to me and patted my shoulder with a huge grin on his face. His eyes gleamed with excitement, the kind that only comes from realizing he had just discovered a future champion. I could tell what he was thinking even before he said anything. He was already imagining his team crushing every other school in the tournament. I was thinking the same thing. The martial arts tournament would be the perfect place to score a long streak of wins, assuming the system counted each victory as a separate opponent. Then, out of nowhere, the first guy I had beaten raised his hand and announced that from now on, he would completely respect me. He even added that if I ever did something humiliating to him, he would not complain, reminding everyone that he had promised before the fight that even if I pooped on his face, he would not say a word. The entire gym went silent for 2 seconds, and then everyone collectively took a few steps back, looking at him with pure disgust. The next day arrived with bright sunlight spilling over the rooftops. Han and I continued our daily training routine. We ran 3 kilometers together before practicing martial arts forms for another hour, fine-tuning every strike, kick, and counter. After that, we moved on to sit-ups and push-ups to build endurance and strength. When we finished, I helped her stretch and gave her a quick massage to ease the soreness in her arms and legs. As for me, I could not afford to slow down. The tournament was coming up fast, and I still had a long way to go before unlocking the martial selection attribute.